What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have yet another video where we're going to be talking about this past NFL season. Today we are going to be going over the biggest upset of every regular season week of the NFL. All right, going over it, we are going to be using the ESPN odds, and it's just how bad or how much the odds were for the winning team to lose. And starting off with week 1, we have a massive upset with the New England Patriots beating out the Cincinnati Bengals with a score of 16-10. As we all know, the Bengals defense was a big issue for them this year, but it was their offense that let them down this time. It all comes down to the ability to keep the ball. Joe Burrow, Tanner Hudson, and Charlie Jones all fumbled the ball this game, and didn't help that Keion White added 2.5 sacks on Joe Burrow with an assistance from Jawan Bentley. Ramondre Stevenson also added 120 yards and a touchdown on the ground, leading to overall havoc and a massive upset with plus 340 odds for the Patriots to win the game. Going on to week 2, we have another upset where an AFC North team fumbles the bag. This time I'm talking about the Ravens losing to the Raiders with a score of 26-23. Funny enough, the odds are the exact same for this one, with the Raiders having plus 340 odds to win. This game comes down entirely to the kickers for each side. Both had active days with a combined 8 field goals attempted for each, being split 4 and 4 for each. The difference was just the fact that Daniel Carlson was a perfect 4 for 4 with a 53 long, while Justin Tucker had 3 for 4 with a 48 long, missing a 56-yarder, which would have tied the game. Both defenses had a great game too, with each having an interception out of Marlon Humphrey and Robert Splin, respectively. Neither quarterback could breathe this game, with great performances out of Max Crosby, who had 5 tackles, 2 sacks, and 4 TFLs, Odafe Oweh, who had 2.5 sacks and 2 TFLs, and Kyle Van Noy with 2 sacks and 3 TFLs. Overall, this was just a massive upset, and one of the biggest ones that we see this whole video. For week 3, we once again see our Bengal friends in the AFC North being poverty as they fell to the Commanders with a score of 38-33. Commanders had plus 280 odds to win. This is closer to what the Bengals knew this year, with it being an absolute shootout. Jade Daniels helped cement that he was the Commanders' guy as he walked into Cincinnati and didn't leave a drive without a score. Let's go over every drive for the Commanders, shall we? We have touchdown, 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 end of half, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, end of game. One of the most dominant performances I've ever seen from a rookie, and this is the type of game that even a lot of legends barely have. One of the most dominant performances that have ever happened from a quarterback. He had 2 passing touchdowns with another on the ground, 254 passing yards, and a team-leading 39 rushing yards. Although no quarterback turned the ball over this game, one was just better, and it definitely helps that Terry McLaurin had 100 yards and a touchdown, while Jamar Chase also had 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. Part of his Triple Crown season. Our next upset is a surprise upset to me, and I think that if you ask people at the end of the season who would have won this game, they would definitely get this one right. I'm talking about the Broncos beating the Jets 10-9, with the Broncos having plus 290 odds. This was one of these games that put some of the fans to sleep. The game started out with a fumble after 3 plays, then 6 consecutive punts, then yet another fumble. That's just in the first quarter. In the second quarter, the first and last drives were Jets field goals, and between that was 5 punts. The third quarter had 3 drives, 2 punts, and a touchdown. We would then see an end of game with 2 field goals, 2 punts, a turnover on downs, 2 missed field goals, and then the ending drive. Excruciating pain for anyone forced to watch this. I actually heard that they were using this as a new torture method in North Korea for anybody who found with a singular idea of something not Kim Jong-un. I don't even want to talk about the fact that there were 60 passing yards and Courtland Sutton had 60 of them. I mean, that is due to negative plays, but still, that's kind of hard to think about. That just makes the game even worse. This was just a snooze fest all around. For week 5, we finally have our first double header. Both the Cardinals and the Giants had plus 280 odds to beat their opponents. So we're going to cover the team that beat the other team by more, being more of a win, being the bigger upset. The Cardinals beat the 49ers by 1 point, while the Giants beat the Seahawks by 9. In that game, the Giants beat the Seahawks with a score of 29-20. Surprisingly, the Giants actually had a really good game with Daniel Jones being their quarterback and Malik Nabers being hurt. Jones put up 295 total yards and 2 touchdowns, and it helps that Darius Slayton had 122 yards and a touchdown in the air, and Tyrone Tracy had 18 carries for 129 yards on the ground. They also performed defensively, with Dexter Lawrence having 3 sacks and 2 TFLs, and DJ Davidson had 2 sacks and 2 TFLs. Outside of a 102-yard fumble recovery at the end of the game by Rayshon Jenkins on the Seahawks and a 356 total yards and a touchdown from Geno Smith, the game didn't seem to be that close, with there always being a pretty decent lead between them. For Week 6, the upset had higher odds to win than we've seen previously, with the Colts beating the Titans 20-17 with plus 125 odds. Entering the third quarter, most people who bet with the Titans were looking joyful, with them having a 7-point lead. Then, on the first drive of the quarter, the Colts got a field goal. Then was a punt, followed by a Joe Flacco to Michael Pittman touchdown for 10 yards. They had the lead. They continued to shut down the Titans' offense for the rest of the quarter and managed to win with 10 points in the third quarter compared to the 0 by the Titans. Overall, neither team had an incredibly impressive performance, with neither team putting up more than 300 total yards. Where Tennessee lacked the passing yards that the Colts had, they had rushing yards to make up for it. Defensively, they were very similar, and their possession time was only a minute apart. The Colts were just the ones able to pull out and get those final points to put themselves above the Titans. For Week 7, we have a very harsh upset where the Seahawks beat the Falcons with a score of 34-14, where they had odds of plus 135. This was another game where the winning team shuts out the fourth quarter with 10 points opposed to the losing team's 0. In the end, it all comes down to the poor performance of Kirk Cousins, where this was one example of those really bad games of his this past year. In this example, Cousins had 3 turnovers. It certainly doesn't help when all 3 of those are in the fourth quarter where it matters the most. It also doesn't help when those were your only touches in the quarter due to your benching. The first turnover was a strip sack by Boye Mafe, which gets returned for a touchdown by Derek Hall. Then you had an interception from an end zone shot to Drake London, taken away by Julian Love. The third and one that got him benched was an interception by Kobe Bryant on a target to Kyle Pitts. If they could have scored on these, they could have won the game. The Seahawks defense had a fun time with Cousins, and it led to the great upset that we've seen, and it led to the benching of Kirk Cousins, where we saw our first glimpse at Michael Penix Jr. Week 8 was different, where the score was close, but the winner was very shocking. I'm talking about when the Browns beat the Ravens 29-24, beating the plus 320 odds. The best part of this is how it happened. It was Jameis Winston's first full game as a Brown, and he put up a clinic with 336 total yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 4 receivers with over 60 yards, led by Cedric Tillman, who had 99 yards and 2 touchdowns, a part of his breakout campaign in the middle of the year. It was a great battle between the offenses, where Lamar Jackson had 335 total yards and 2 touchdowns, Derrick Henry had almost 7 yards per carry, and Zay Flowers had 115 yards. It was a close game all the way to the end, where it was ended by a quick touchdown drive from each team, ending with a final turnover on downs for the Ravens, which led the Browns to secure the very shocking win to move on to 2 wins. For Week 9, we have a divisional game that got a coach fired. I'm talking about when the Panthers beat the Saints 23-22, beating plus 270 odds. Now, this was a textbook good game, with both offenses putting up great plays, being suspenseful, and leading to a final drive where the Saints just happened to fall short. One player who was very good this year was Alvin Kamara, who led the team in both rushing and receiving yards, combining for 215. Carr also had a good game with 236 yards and a touchdown. Their defense was also able to snag an interception and get 5 TFLs. The Panthers just fought a little bit better. Defensively, they were very similar, getting 1 sack and 5 TFLs, the exact same as the Panthers. On offense, Chuba Hubbard put up 72 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, while Jatavion Sanders stepped up in the receiving game with 87 yards. For the Saints, Blake Grupe also stepped up with 3 field goals, making them all with a 51 long. Overall, the Panthers just had that last push in their last drive, something that solidified Bryce Young as their quarterback for the rest of the season. The Carolina Reapers stepped up once again in Week 10, getting back-to-back major upsets, now in Germany against the Giants. They won yet another close game with a score of 20-17, ending in overtime, beating the plus 230 odds. This was a very sloppy and gritty game of football, as there were many fumbles and a persistent ground game from both teams. Tyrone Tracy had 103 yards and a touchdown on the ground, with almost 6 yards per carry. On the other side, Chuba Hubbard had 153 yards and a touchdown on the ground, with a 5.5 average. Passing was very sloppy this game, with Daniel Jones throwing 190 yards, 2 interceptions with 0 touchdowns through the air. Bryce Young had 126 yards and a touchdown. For the Giants, Andrew Phillips had a forced fumble, and Brian Burns had a sack and 2 TFLs. For the Panthers, A'Shawn Robinson and DJ Wonnum both had a sack and 2 TFLs, along with forced fumbles out of Tyrone Tracy, one of which being on the second play of overtime, setting up for the game-winning field goal. Just another great game that came right down to the end. And a lot of people thought this would be torture for Germany as a punishment for, well, we know what it'd be punished for. Instead, it ended up being a very entertaining game, and I actually remember watching this one. Week 11 held another repeat team for us as the Seahawks beat the 49ers with a score of 20-17, beating the plus 240 odds. This division rivalry was a close one, ending in a suspenseful 12-play, 2-minute, 26-second drive that ended with a 13-yard Geno Smith rushing touchdown. I wouldn't make this play, however, you assume that Geno Smith had a good game, as he committed 2 turnovers, one of which being an interception by Isaac Yiadom and the other being a fumble. Jackson Smith-Njigba had a great game, having almost exactly half of Geno's passing yards with 110. Otherwise, Christian McCaffrey had a good game, putting up 79 rushing yards. Jauan Jennings had a great game as well with 91 yards and a touchdown through the air. He had more yards than all the other receivers combined for San Francisco. Nick Bosa also saw what Geno looked like and proceeded to get a sack and a half and also 2 TFLs. Overall, it was a very hard-fought game where Seattle was just able to produce more in the final minutes in San Francisco, having Geno Smith showing his clutch game. Week 12 is the biggest upset we've seen so far, with the Cowboys beating the Commanders with a score of 34-26, beating the Mass plus 450 odds. This game was absolutely insane because it was so bad until it wasn't. In the first quarter, there were 3 missed field goals, a made field goal, and then a fumble. That also moves us to the second quarter, where there were 6 punts, an interception, and a field goal. Week 12 is the biggest upset we've seen so far, with the Cowboys beating the Commanders with a score of 34-26, beating the Mass plus 450 odds. This game was insane because it was so bad until it wasn't. In the first quarter, there were 3 missed field goals, a made field goal, and a fumble. That moves us to the second quarter, where there were 6 punts, an interception, and a field goal. A snooze fest, a truly big snooze fest. The second half opened up firing, however, with 2 back-to-back touchdowns. Then there were 5 straight punts before all hell broke loose. Let's go through it. Starting out, we have a field goal for Dallas. Then Donovan Wilson forces a fumble out of John Bates, and Eric Kendricks recovers. With that, Cooper Rush finds Lucas Schoonmaker for the touchdown in the middle of the field from 22 yards out. In response, Jaden Daniels finds Zach Ertz in the end zone for a 4-yard touchdown. The very next play, Kevontae Turpin breaks ankles around the field for a kick return touchdown. Austin Seibert then replies with a 51-yard field goal. Then they force Dallas to punt, and Daniels finds Terry McLaurin in the middle of the field, and he runs it in for an 86-yard touchdown. Then, in mass desperation, Washington attempts an onside kick, but I don't know if I'm going to say this right. Juanya Thomas recovers and returns it for a touchdown, sealing the game for Dallas. Some highlight players are Cooper Rush, who had 247 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, Rico Dowell, who had 86 yards and a 4.5 average on the ground, Jordan Lewis, who had 6 total tackles and a forced fumble, Donovan Wilson, who had 4 total tackles and a forced fumble, Chauncey Golston, who had a tackle and an interception, Israel Mukuamu, who had 1 tackle and an interception, Josh Butler, who had 12 tackles and a sack, and Micah Parsons, who had 8 tackles, 2 sacks, and 2 TFLs. Overall, just a dominant performance from Dallas, and honestly what I thought they were going to be this whole year. Somehow, the Super Bowl winning Eagles are going to end up on today's video as they beat our best friends, the Ravens, 24-19 in Week 13, beating their plus 140 odds. Just like I said before, all it comes down to is Justin Tucker, where he missed 2 kicks, which would have won the game for them. It also doesn't help when your quarterback fumbles twice. Other than the 2 fumbles, Lamar had 316 total yards and 2 touchdowns, along with Derrick Henry's 82 rushing yards. For the Eagles, Saquon had 107 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and Jalen Carter had 4 tackles with a sack and 3 TFLs. Zach Bond and Keely Ringo both forced fumbles, and Broderick Washington added 1 for Baltimore on Saquon Barkley. A great game with some good stats between 2 of the best teams in the conference, and honestly, this was one of the matchups that people were speculating for the Super Bowl, so this is honestly a very good way to see it. For Week 14, I get to talk about one of the best games of the entire year, where the Rams beat the Bills by a score of 44-42, beating the plus 160 odds. Josh Allen had an absolutely insane game, having 424 total yards, and became the first player in NFL history to have 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 passing touchdowns. Khalil Shakir added 106 yards and a touchdown, and Amari Cooper had 95 yards. For the Rams, Matthew Stafford had 320 yards and 2 touchdowns, matched by 2 touchdowns and 87 yards on the ground by Kyren Williams. Puka Nacua had 162 yards and a touchdown, and Cooper Kupp had 92 yards and a touchdown. It was absolutely unbelievable to see. and a game that's going to be referenced for years and years to come. It's the best game that I've personally watched. Let's go over the drives, all right? So starting off, we had a 3-yard touchdown rush for Kyren, then a 1-yard rushing touchdown for Josh Allen, then a Cardi 22-yard field goal, then a blocked punt from Jacob Hummel returned for a touchdown by Hunter Long, then a 41-yard receiving touchdown for Ty Johnson, then a Puka Nacua touchdown for 4 yards, then a Bills punt, then the end of half, then a punt from the Bills, then a 7-yard Kyren touchdown, then a 51-yard Shakir touchdown, then a 17-yard Cup touchdown, then a 1-yard Josh Allen rushing touchdown, then a Rams punt, then a Matt Collins 21-yard touchdown, then a 19-yard Puka Nacua touchdown, then a Josh Allen 1-yard touchdown, and then a Rams punt to seal it. An absolutely unbelievable game where neither team could possibly be stopped. And honestly, this is probably the best quarterback performance of the entire year and maybe of the decade. For week 15, we have another tie. This time it's between the Cowboys, who beat the Panthers 30-14, and the Buccaneers, who beat the Chargers 40-17. They both had plus 130 odds to win it, so we're going to talk about the bigger win, the Buccaneers. This was a great game that was really close going to half, with the Chargers leading 17-13. The Chargers proceeded to not score for the rest of the half, as the Buccaneers took over, scoring 17 points in the third quarter and 10 points in the fourth quarter. Domination. Baker Mayfield had just over 300 total yards with 4 touchdowns opposed to 1 interception. Bucky Irving blew up with 117 rushing yards and an insane 7.8 average. Mike Evans also had a great game, hauling in 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. Vi Jones forced 2 fumbles and Jamel Dean had an interception. They also held the Chargers to a combined 32 rushing yards, with no receiver having more than 60 yards. Overall, a massive game for the Bucs where they were supposed to fall, and a game that honestly could have been the reason that they made the postseason. I don't know how the Carolina Reapers keep making this list, but they seem to just have a clutch gene, as they beat the Cardinals in overtime 30-36, beating their plus 180 odds. This is a game that came right down to the end, but a late season Kyler Murray came out, as so did a prime Chuba Hubbard. On the ground, Hubbard had 152 yards and 2 touchdowns, one of which being a 21-yard rush for the game-winning touchdown. Kyler Murray had 265 all-purpose yards and 2 all-purpose touchdowns, but he also had a fumble early in the game and an interception in the fourth quarter. James Conner was able to pick up some collateral, as he had 117 yards and a touchdown on the ground with a 7.8 average, as well as a team-leading 49 receiving yards. In the end, the Panthers were just able to come out with Bryce Young having 226 total yards and 3 touchdowns, with 0 turnovers, the thing that really won them the game, the ability to not turn over the ball. The Giants finally find themselves on the good side of this list, as they beat the Colts 45-33, overcoming the plus 320 odds. The only bad part of this is the fact that this took them out of the first pick of the draft, and they also fell to the pick where they got Abdul Carter. This was a legendary battle against Joe Flacco and Drew Lock, where one of them played really good and the other did not. Drew Lock was great, throwing for 309 yards and 4 touchdowns with no takeaways. That last part is why Joe Flacco played badly. While he threw for 330 yards and 2 touchdowns, he also had 3 turnovers. For one, he was intercepted by Dane Belton. For another, he was intercepted by Andrew Phillips. And for the third, he was strip sacked by Kayvon Thibodeau on the last drive of the game. Both offenses had great weapons this game too. For the Giants, Malik Neighbors had 171 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, and Wan'Dale Robinson had 71 yards and a score. The Colts' weapons were unstoppable outside of Flacco, with Jonathan Taylor having 125 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, Alec Pierce having 122 yards and a touchdown, and Michael Pittman having 109 yards and a touchdown. Overall, though, both teams came alive, except the Colts had a major issue at their passer, while the Giants honestly looked really good with their quarterback. The final week of the regular season is one for rest for the best teams in the league, and that's what the Packers were and what they did. With their backups in and the Bears playing starters, the odds were still against the Bears with plus 340 odds. They, however, barely held on against the Packers and won 24-22, with a last-second field goal out of Cairo Santos from 51 yards out, sealing it. This was your textbook close game, with no quarter having more than a 1-score difference. The Packers started their starters for the first part of the game and then handed it off to their backups. Emmanuel Wilson put up 73 yards and a touchdown on the ground, with there being 3 rushers with over 40 yards. Malik Heath led the team in receiving yards with 53. Xavier McKinney got an interception for 17 yards as well. What really beat them was a fumble out of Malik Willis and Jaden Reed. DJ Moore had 86 yards and a touchdown, with him also having a fumble. Outside of that, it was just a really tight game, and it came down to the very last play, and the Packers just didn't find themselves on the good part of history for this week. So that is going to do it for the video, everybody. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like and subscribe. I take a lot of time on all my videos because I like to do a lot of research. I'd like to really grow the channel out. But this was a great NFL season, and I can't wait for the next one to start, and I can't wait to hopefully be doing this the same time next year, looking back at the past season. This series is going to be really fun. It's my first edition of it, and I think that there's a lot of potential to branch out into other things here, as long as you guys support me. Without further ado, I'm going to let you guys go. Peace out and goodbye.